You're listening to Almost Beach Glass Interviews. I'm Gil. I'm really interested in the creative process. Today, my guest is
Tim Mechling. I'm a independent music artist out of Bellingham, Washington. I felt really pretentious to say, but keep it in. Keep it.
What is your advice for aspiring artists?
I would say do away with any sort of like mystique or, don't try to be like cool. Don't try to be a cool artist. It's kind of like in high school. Like the second you stop trying to be cool is when you actually make friends with people. Don't people can really smell desperation and inauthenticity. So just do your weird eccentric thing. Don't let anybody like mitigate or like water down what you're putting out there.
Are we kind of talking about like putting on airs for the audience to portray a certain image, I guess?
I think that's kind of a relic of the past. It's kind of almost like quaint to think it's just like when Paul McCartney was in the Beatles, they wanted, because he looked a little bit exotic, they wanted to change his stage name to Ramon, like he was like maybe a Spaniard or something.
Okay, I feel like I'm getting the gist that the epitome of this vibe would be like the 1980s hair metal, that they go on stage and they're become WWE wrestlers.
Well, there's like, don't get me wrong, I love the pageantry of a lot of that, like Meatloaf and those kinds of guys, but a lot of people are very careful to craft their image as like this kind of like dark or disturbed or mysterious artist, and it maybe I listen to music, but it seems like now the more authentic you are as an artist, the more people kind of pick up what you're laying down versus like, oh, I'm going to have kind of a Johnny Depp vibe.
Gotcha.
Like I'm going to be like kind of like a gothed up Tom York. That's going to be my vibe.
So is it kind of like it gets in the way of the vulnerability of music being relatable?
I don't know if that's what I would say. I would say that just, I would say like Phoebe Bridgers is a good example of somebody that like her music's really cool and she's writing really heavy stuff, but in an interview, she's a total goof. Same with like Mac DeMarco, Post Malone, another example. I think now that the 90s are over, like Tom York from Radiohead, he's really goofy now in interviews, and I love it. I'm like, oh, that's a real guy, and it doesn't make his music any less that, it was very like head in hand, like a manufactured image as like a mysterious weirdo in the 90s. And I like him better this way.
I definitely see the artistic freedom that provides, that Tom York could go into singer-songwriter stuff, some electronica kind of stuff, and have the freedom to do so. And I definitely see a parallel with you in the sense that you take your music seriously, but you don't take yourself seriously. And I find that really cool, that you can create an album that's entirely different than what you do, a year from your past release or something like that.
Well, you're only 50% wrong about that, because I don't take my music seriously either. But
tell me about it.
Okay. I think that a lot of people, you interviewed Tad, and Tad's wonderful. And he has, I think it's a Leonard Cohen term that he calls like the Tower of Song, and it's like this like sacred thing to write a song that's like capital T true. And he goes up in his lonesome tower and he'll work on a song for years and years and years because there's a lie
I
in
know
there
this. I know the
somewhere.
part that you're talking about. That we were talking about
Yeah.
Hallelujah specifically.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. And that's wonderful. I love that people do that, but I don't do that. It's more like a song hits me when I'm like driving or something. I'm like, fuck, I gotta write a song now. Like it's kind of a chore, and then I have to like pull over and like text it to myself or write it on a napkin or something like that. It always strikes you like I never like sit down to write. It's always like I'll be like cooking some meat or something. And I'm like, oh my god, that's a good one. I gotta write that down.
So can you explain to me how you get an initial idea that hits you, and then for it all the way coming to fruition? Because there must be something about not taking it seriously that really works. Because you've created how many albums in the past, like 10 years?
It depends on what you count as an album, but I've put out a couple of hundred things.
That is much more than I thought, but
A
yeah,
lot
so
of
that
it,
speaks to it. Yeah.
a lot of it has not been released on the internet.
Okay.
I'll put it that way.
Okay.
But yeah, there's
A prolific creator.
yeah. I think that like every song comes from an idea, and some people are very like lyrics first, like they write their songs almost like it's like a poem or like a journal entry, or and then some people write the melody first, some people write the chords, some people like start with the vibe, or they want to write a song like something else. But it's always fair game. Like all of these are cool ways to start an album, or like start like any kernel to begin a song is fair game. I think
So for that example that you were running through, it ends up on a napkin or text back to yourself. How do you keep that momentum going without letting it have like some weight to it and feeling that you have expectations, I guess?
I would say that in school I was kind of like I couldn't listen to the teacher unless I was doodling on the margins.
That can resonate with me.
So like I don't know if it's ADD or what it is, but I listen better if I'm drawing a stupid picture or something. Like I don't. It just it was just a thing, and everybody assumed I wasn't listening. But I was like, no, I have to do this. So I think music, I think more as like doodles and sketches. They're not like your magnum opus. It's not Rembrandt. It's just these are things like it's like a little cartoon. So when you're talking about like momentum and stuff, like how do you keep momentum on a sketch? You just keep.
I think the frame I'm looking at is wrong. I think that I was seeing that music as something that you create to, end up with a product or an end goal. It sounds like it's more of making the music is the part that is the fulfilling part, and not necessarily what you come away with at the end.
Yeah, and I would say that's accurate. Like I love the creative process. I like to have like the gears turning. I hear that's the same with like gamblers. Gamblers aren't obsessed with like winning or losing necessarily, but they just like the wheels to be turning. They like, things to be in motion. And I think that's that's what I dig. And it's deflating to be done with something. I'm just like, oh man, now I have to like play gigs with this music, and I have to like spam everybody with promotions, and I have to memorize all the words to the songs that I recorded.
So I agree with you that it's so fun to be in that like that headspace of potential where it's like, this something could become anything. But I want to say more often than not, but a decent amount of the time I find myself kind of limiting my own creativity or becoming a little bit stressed or obsessive to have it turn out a certain way. How do you guide your projects to be good when you approach it so casually?
I think that it turns into something different when you work on something. Like it's cool to have an idea for how an album's going to come out, almost kind of like a mood board.
Wait, can you explain that to me?
Well, so when I was making Vandal Hands of Man, which so like I'd made like so many albums. Let me Tarantino this. Let me like rewind a little bit.
I'm ready. Yeah.
I'd made a lot of albums with a lot of like crazy effects and plugins because I was learning how to use like Logic, and I was like, oh, that's a compressor. That's what that does. It's like, oh, this distortion's so cool. And John Swanky, who's an awesome artist, he's like, man, you should just do one that's like 100% acoustic. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. But it's like, I don't want to just write like a dry like singer-songwriter album. So what I did was I was like, well, there was a time when everything was acoustic, and it was like the Civil War through like the 20s. So I started like kind of like getting like Ken Burns style like photos of like everything from that era, and like people with like missing limbs and people drunk in a speakeasy, jazz players, blues musicians on the side of the road, abject poverty, just like those strange, like weird old America moments. And I was like, oh man, I kind of want to, I want to capture that weird old America energy in this recording.
It's so interesting because just zooming out for a quick second, I feel like I've seen that imagery of something, I guess to describe it as like freak show Americana, going as early back as your first album, which there's like I'm not going to get the name exactly right, but like Crackhead Blues or something like that on it that has this like Americana kind of salt of the earth, but looking at it in kind of like a cozy tongue-in-cheek way. I don't know. Is that intentional that you have like these dark American themes kind of going throughout your discography?
I would say that I'm a child of like the 90s. Like as a 90s kid, there was a lot of like really disgusting, like gross out kind of freak show comedies, Ren and Stimpy, Rocko's Modern Life. MTV was full of just these bizarre animations. And I think, and my dad was obsessed with like R. Crumb and Monty Python. And
I love Robert Crumb. Yeah.
oh, so
Yeah.
good. So good.
Yeah. And I think that's a hearing that, I see the relation to it. That's cool.
Yeah, so I've always been obsessed with like the gargoyle aspects of American life, and like the story of America is bizarre and it's totally weird, and I don't think there's anything wholesome about America. Like I think it's the least wholesome. It is a monstrous place, and the history of America has been bananas, and some of the coolest art has ever come, like that the world's ever seen, has come out of America. But I would say that Norman Rockwell, like apple pie, Thanksgiving, clean cut, I don't know, kind of conservative American idea of what things are, that has never been the case in this country. And I'm trying to reflect just how macabre this whole dance has been the whole time.
Interesting. So I guess hearing you say that, it's that you're looking through that cozy, homey apple pie lens at some really harsh realities, kind of displaying the dissonance between, I don't know, some of our notions and some of the realities of the past, kind of going back to what you're talking about, the Civil War, and creating this acoustic album.
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of... another thing is, like, I can't take this world straight. Like I can't just write like a straight love song. I can't. It's got to have like some kind of eerie twist or like a riddle, or it's got to be from the perspective of a character with something very, very wrong with them. Like it's got to. I can't just write an honest song. It's always got to be somebody's got to have gangrene. Somebody's got to, and maybe that's a limitation on my part, but I just can't.
Well, I love Hemingway as well, and I solely know that you like Hemingway because of a lyric in Hornet's Nest. It's Hornet's Nest, right? That has
Yeah.
the Hemingway one in it.
Yeah.
That being an ER, bus driver or something in World War II or something, right? Doesn't he have something like that? Or is
Yeah. That was his career. He was like an ambulance driver, and he was in Spain, I think.
yeah, something like that.
What was that? For Whom the Bell Tolls.
Yeah, and undeniably twisted American character. So, like, I get the scope that we're looking through.
Yeah, I would say that, in terms of, not that I have like a wide audience, but the people that really like what I do are wounded in some way. They're usually people that have undergone like a weird trauma or something. Like I don't like I I really don't attract the normies with my music. Like I don't think there's a single person that's like I don't think there's like somebody that enjoys golf that also enjoys my music. I think it's well, I might be wrong. There's some eccentric folks that but like top 40 radio listeners would they would have some issues with my song craft, I would say.
So it seems like a stark juxtaposition to not take the music serious,
Mm-hmm.
and then to have what comes through the music be very serious. And I think that that's kind of why I had the misconception when we started this conversation that you take your craft very seriously. I I'm kind of curious, like when this happens so naturally of just writing the songs and creating them. How do you piece together an album or see a body of work through to fruition?
It kind of develops as you write it. Like sometimes, like the newest album that's coming out, it might already be out, but I don't know when this airs. But itself, the Sea started out as like a goof. I just wanted to make a song that was like very 1973 Pink Floyd, and I made the song
I
called
love the credit roll. That's
Oh yeah.
that's very cool. I enjoy that one very much. I'm excited to listen to the rest of it.
Yeah, I wrote this song called Must Be a Dream, and it's like, it's so Pink Floyd that it made me laugh to begin with. And then I was like, oh my God, I forgot how much I love like this sound. And I love this, like, cause I was obsessed with Pink Floyd when I was a kid. And I was like, well, I want to kind of do kind of like a meditation on like 70s pretentious prog. I just want to make like, now I want to make an album that's like there's a 22-minute long song. Like it fills the whole B-side of the album. It's called The Darkening. And it's very long. And it has a lot of moving parts. It's very weird. But that's a huge part of my like music education was, metal, Adam Hart Mother. These are Pink Floyd albums.
Okay, I didn't recognize that one. Yeah,
That people.
is that the one with the cow on it?
It's got a cow on it.
Okay, I've listened to it briefly, but definitely not enough to be able to give,
I'll
more
say
than
that
song.
one is like it's hidden treasure. It Adam Hart Mother,
Because there's a couple acoustic ones on that, or isn't there?
Fat Old Son. That's a great song. Yeah, so it's the one that people kind of miss, but I love that era of Pink Floyd. So itself, the Sea was a chance to flex that muscle and kind of like, it's like a love letter to that specific era of that sort of like pretentious, dark, slow tempo prog music.
So you have a reverence for history, but even more specifically, the history of music. And I think that really speaks to your adjacent venture, which is Washington's Records, which I'd love to hear a little bit about that and how these two sides of you coincide.
Sure. Well, I'm very proud of the work we've done. Sam Chu and I have put a ton of work into building a independent record label here, and like it really came from us putting out music in the last couple of years, and what it like all the things that you thought happens when you put an album out versus like what actually happens. Because I tried to get like my music reviewed. I tried to get it out there, and I tried to get like quality people that were good at writing to write reviews.
And when you say released, are we talking about the physicality element of music, or are we just talking about getting music out there in general?
I think just like getting it out there.
Okay.
Like physical releases are, that's its own separate thing that is a very cool, specific little slice of life.
So you guys focus on vinyl, but right now we're speaking to the wider of what actually happens of getting from the computer into ears.
Yes.
Cool. Okay.
So like you throw something on SoundCloud and like it's so kind of like inconsequential when it's just up, and you have to because I'd never done it through Spotify and streaming distribution before, and like when I did it, they're like, oh, you got to go through Submit Hub and you got to submit to these playlists where these curators who are psychopaths will write really dismissive things about why your music isn't a good fit for their particular like bozo playlist, and you're trying to like appease these like playlist curators. And same thing with like the editorial team at Spotify, and you're kind of submitting.
So we're talking about gatekeepers.
Oh my god, it's this horrible bottleneck. And I did get a couple reviews. Some of them were really cool reviews. I'll say that there were 3 or 4 that I really liked for one of my albums. And then the rest of them were just, it was like 400 words. And it was just like, Tim Mechling is a Washington-based artist. It's like basically information that I gave to him. And it would be like, the album is 43 minutes long, and it features...
Oh, geez, that's dry. Yeah.
It is so... It's like just the facts.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's like... And I guess I was of the mind, because I grew up with like copies of like Rolling Stone and Cream magazine kicking around the house, and I would read them, and like people would write about Led Zeppelin 4, and they would write about Paul Simon's contribution, and
here's some of the gossip of what happened in the studio.
Yeah,
and is
there
it
was
really
like
that
this mythology about everything, and it was like, and people, I bet half of them were just like on speed and coke and whatever, like writing these like odes to like classic rock and roll albums, but that just didn't exist. So I'm like, I'm gonna write 1,500 words about Disaster Queen. I'm gonna write like 2,000 words about the Stillvettas. I'm gonna write, like I'm going to give that deep dive review experience to people that don't get that, and they're not submitting to me.
So I think that's really sweet that what you're looking for,
Mm-hmm.
obviously frustrated in some regard towards the gatekeepers,
Mm-hmm.
that you give what you're looking for instead of trying to claw for it elsewhere. They're like, let me provide for other people what I would like for myself. And I think that is really beautiful, speaking towards your label and its sense of community. So that's fucking cool.
Yeah, there is also no money to be made in like writing long form reviews of people. So it's a ton of work and research and
my stupid
time.
fucking zine. I know that.
Oh yeah. What am I talking to? I mean, like it's like if we didn't love the shit out of music, like capital L love music, we wouldn't have done any of this, because there's easier ways to make money than through an independent record label.
I know, we just all be on an Instacart.
Yeah. What's funny is like I worked in marketing agencies for a long time, and the like people in those kinds of jobs are paid so much for so little work. And then when you turn around and you do something that you think is meaningful, you do so much work for so little pay. It's an insane flip of the script there.
So,
But
so being that you've seen these different sides of the music business and also seeing it as a label and as a passion,
mm-hmm.
just super cut and dry. Someone creates an album or song or whatever, let's say album just for body of work's sake,
Mm-hmm.
and they want to share it with people. What do you think's the best way to do that?
The best way to share music with people?
Yeah, maybe that's something that you've learned through your experience with the label or just all of it.
I would say never do. I mean, it's a cliche, but Charlie Brown said to get nowhere, follow the crowd. Like, there's a million. I'm better at telling you what not to do.
Hey, let's do. All right,
Yeah.
let's get some do's and or let's get a bunch of don'ts,
Yeah,
and then
do's
maybe we
and
can
don'ts.
get a couple do's out of it.
So don't read those top 5 things to do to promote your music kind of blogs, because everybody's like, oh, if you want to get your music out there, you need to.
So the first don't is don't do the do's.
Don't do the do's.
Okay, all right.
Do
Tongue
the don'ts.
twister number 1. Cool.
Don't do what Donnie Don't does. That's the first to do.
Okay, cool.
No, but like, there's people I know that are incredibly spammy with their promotions, and
Don't be a trope that's overused of, hey, send this to 5 people that you, I don't know. I'm just making up a thing.
there's all that kind of like broad strokes, like what anybody can do, and people think that they have to like network this specific way and upload. They have to post like 5 times a week on their Instagram stories about some bar they're playing that, they're barking up the same tree. Like, their audience just gets so bored of like what they're doing. And who I would hold to a really high standard is like Devin Champlin and the Sons of Rainier, like, because all of their promotional material is super, super artistic, and it doesn't feel derivative of what other people are doing.
Also, to that note, we're speaking of the Champlin music, right? That fella?
That fella.
That, just speaking towards the shop, such a beloved shop by the people closest to it.
Mm-hmm.
They do half the promo. Like things of people working there or going to get their guitar checked out there. But yeah, it's not like you could take that and say, it's not a digestible note or an applicable note to say have people like your stuff so much that they shout it out too,
Like, I think that's it's kind of an old-timey thing that like quality sells itself. Like, if you, I mean, of course, in the streaming age, it's hard to get people to those ears, but the best thing you can do is when like a handful of cool people dig what you do, they let other people know. And that's been the root of like any modicum of success that I've had has not been through Submit Hub or going quote unquote viral or like spamming everybody.
Because you've had multiple write-ups in the newspaper here.
Yeah. And a lot of them are just people that are like enthusiastic about it. But literally all I did was like, I give my music to like the people that want it, and I make it for the, like, it's not for everybody. It's really not. It's like, I bet half the people that listen to this thing are not going to dig what I do. And that's cool. I'm totally fine with that. But what I want is I want it to resonate with a very, very small, specific group of people that turn other weirdos onto it. Because if every weirdo has 5 weirdo friends that would also like it, that's my niche. Those are my people. And those are the people that like keep coming to your shows. There's people that have bought everything that I've ever made. Every shirt that we've ever put up on Washington's, there's people that get every single one. And they're such diehard fans that like that's who you're making the music for. Like, it would be great to, reach a wider audience, but I think getting like local indie cred is probably the highest like praise that somebody like me could go for. To be an outsider artist that makes weird shit, and there's like a small but diehard group of people that like it. That's the goal. And a lot of the subject matter is not for polite conversation. Like I like to write really long story songs that are just not a nice story. And a lot of people make the mistake that I'm advocating for like violence and all this horrible stuff. It's like you're allowed to write like basically a short story, a dark short story, but like Edgar Allan Poe isn't saying we should kill people because of their milky eye. He wasn't saying that.
Telltale Heart, I see it.
Yeah, he was writing a story, and so as artists, we're allowed to do that. So if I write a song with a murder in it, I'm not saying that we should all just ignore the rule of law and start murdering.
So since this came up, I would love to get your thoughts on something that I have found semi-recently.
Okay.
Through just the music scene in Bellingham, I have become conscious of a subgenre called doom folk or murder folk. Have you heard of that genre?
Yes.
What is? I guess. Do you want to give a quick what your definition of it would be? Maybe
my understanding of it is kind of it's kind of like grim fairy tales a little bit.
Okay.
Like it's. Or maybe more like horrorcore for like rap.
There we go. Yeah,
where it's scary and it's dark and it's
but folk music,
evil and it's macabre, and there's murder ballad is a very time tested form of music. There's been stories about people dying since probably people were killing people.
So I find it disturbing. I find it like I find it something that is makes me scared of the creator, but it's not just, it's different from what you're describing in the sense that you're describing fiction through a very controlled lens. That I see this murder folk, doom folk as someone expressing where they're cognitively at.
Sure.
Yeah, and do you look at that genre of music with artistic reverence, or how do you see it as a creator who does something adjacent?
I absolutely revere it. I love it. I think that you can tell, just like the Bible has parables, you can tell these stories to tell a bigger, broader story that has universality and room for interpretation. One way I was doing that was my album Decline of the Flies and Rise of Spiders.
Cool. Yeah.
Which is kind of a Southern Gothic Dark Side of the Moon was kind of my idea for that one. But there's a lot of Civil War themes and nods to it, and it really does have this kind of Civil War concept running through it. There's a song on that album called Sebastian and Kip, and it's about Siamese twins, and one of them falls in love. They're like conjoined at the hip, and one of them falls in love with a girl, and he's so convinced that the girl wouldn't ever want to be with him because he's a conjoined twin, that he takes a chainsaw and he cuts his brother off of himself, and they both bleed out and die. But that was, if we're talking about America dividing in the Civil War,
interesting.
This body must be cut from the other one. A house divided cannot stand. Like there was a lot of so to speak to the larger theme of the Civil War going on, and like the parting of two bodies to achieve this lofty goal, and killing both sides of the idea in the process.
It's so funny hearing you explain that when you're talking about chainsawing, saying that part of the story. I got grossed out and I was ready to, check out for 15 seconds. But
Hmm.
then you said the metaphorical value to it.
Sure.
Now I could talk about Chanson twins for an hour. Like, yes, and
Yeah,
the
and that's
one twin still needed, but they both love each other, but need
and,
so
and some people, they don't get that, like, these are symbols, these are images, these are shapes that we're holding up for people to interpret. So like I'm not saying that all Siamese twins should be sawed in twain.
of course that. Yeah.
I mean, like, that's not what I'm saying
It's
at
a
all.
metaphoric message.
Yeah, but if somebody interpreted the song to be that, there's also a song I have where a woman is tied to the railroad tracks and killed by a train, which is a very like Snidely Whiplash, like classic, like,
Wile E. Coyote kind of
yeah, it's
vibes.
like a very like, it's like a trope in like old talkies and movies and stuff. But you can say something about what that train represents, what that woman represents, what these men represent, what the narrator of the story represent. You can, this is all fair game, and it's way more interesting than just writing a straight love song, in my opinion.
Hmm.
I dabbled in writing short fiction for a while.
Cool. I do a little bit of writing myself, but
Yeah,
it's mostly nonfiction. But I tried a short fiction recently. But yeah, what's the parallel that you see with the songwriting that you're talking about?
I would say that fiction is always loosely veiled nonfiction. That even if you think you're making up a story, you're very much writing something that rings true to you. That there's a part of you written in it, even if it's like, it's kind of like how you literally cannot.
Dude, I see what you're saying, that
Yeah.
what we think and put on paper is a culmination of all of the lived experiences that we have.
Hmm.
Therefore, it's based in reality, and kind of like an hourglass, that that creation lives at the center part where it spreads out again,
Hmm.
would be the audience seeing this, emotional Rorschach test, and they're taking all their real experiences and
Hmm.
kind of deriving meaning from the fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that with songwriting, just like fiction, there's like, you may think that you're putting a random image in something, but it has been passed through your subconscious and it's resonating in some part of you somewhere, wants you to put that on the piece of paper. And that's why that image is there in this specific moment of time. It occurred to you to put it down on paper as that thing. You're going to sing about this thing. And I think that's also why I work really fast. I usually never.
Do you trust your intuition when you are creating?
Yeah, I trust that there are things working in the background that I don't, that are not front of mind, that I don't understand.
You're talking
So
about your processing.
yeah, so
Okay.
I would say that improvisation, in terms of like lyrics, and sometimes lyrics that you put down as a placeholder, because they're like, oh, I don't like that. I'll change it later. Like half my lyrics are like placeholder lyrics that I'm like, oh, I'll change that later, and then I was like, well, there's something here. Like, why did my brain randomly?
I see why you and Tad are such great buddies. Because there's definitely a reverence to the subconscious
Mhm.
and what comes out first. So there's something very sincere to that, even if it's fiction, which you painted, which I find, yeah, I agree with that very much. So I wouldn't have gone into this conversation with that frame of mind, but I'll be definitely leaving with it.
For
Pretty cool.
sure. And uh, I would say that, man, it's like once we start talking about like fiction and like the subconscious and things like that, it's um, Jeff Tweedy said that it's really impossible to talk about your music without sounding really arrogant. And you're sitting around talking to musicians all day, so it must be like, it just all. Everything I'm saying sounds really egotistical, and I'm
You
never
know,
trying to do
I
that.
I don't think so at all because
Okay.
I think for anyone to make art that's for themselves and gets any kind of recognition, as you said, has an element of vulnerability of
Hmm.
kind of showing more than we do on daily conversations. And I think the vulnerability makes it nowhere near pretentious at all.
With art, I think a lot of people get that kind of like, this is the real me. This is the secret, deep down, like, version of me. So a lot of artists I know are really like, they're really vulnerable when you critique that thing that they do. And I think it's because it feels like you're attacking like this tender little part, like the meat in the oyster.
How do you feel about that? Because I see you showing 10 different, sincere, this is the real me. Because
Hmm.
there's very, very playful,
Hmm.
more joking versions and then very serious, somber versions. Yeah. How do you feel when, I don't know. Yeah. That was an interesting point to bring up because
I think people are multifaceted and they have a lot of moods. And I would say that there's a lot of sides to a person. And I would say that so one thing that I've kind of discovered about branding, like when, like there was a big thing with personal branding for like people's Twitters and online personas and stuff. We're getting back to that original thing. But the thing about branding is it's a very boring person because a brand basically says the same thing over and over and over again in different ways. And it's extremely it's deflating to sit in a room with somebody that keeps repeating themselves all the time. So I hate artists that just kind of put out the same album over and over again. And then sometimes those albums are like the same song over and over again. It is like it sucks the air out of the room. It's so like I immediately turn off. It's like, oh, this guy wrote another one of these. Oh, this girl wrote another breakup song. Okay, all right. Like it really.
do you like to see the progression of artists
I do.
just as like they're people and we
I
kind of change over time?
so and that's an important thing, is that I know people that every time they put out a new album or every couple of years or so, they delete their past catalog and they
Now
act.
we're on a Hannah note.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
And
okay, I'll let you go
I've
for it.
talked with Hannah about these people, but they like reinvent themselves every couple of years as like they change their genre a little bit and they change their look, and all of a sudden they're this kind of artist and they like pretend that like they didn't do this body of work before. And I love to watch where people.
You like to see that contrast, not more that gradient of it changing over time, maybe.
Yeah, and like the fact that I don't know, like the Beach Boys went from singing about surfing on the beach to the most horrifying, scary music I've ever heard in my life.
I do not know to what you are referring.
Oh, you got to listen to Smiley Smile.
What's that guy's name? The
Brian
piano
Wilson.
player, Brian Wilson. There we go.
Yeah.
So is this a Brian Wilson centric thing?
Yeah, it is. Okay, so
Could you
he
give us a quick
was
story?
okay. So Brian Wilson was kind of like a nervous guy, and they came from a horrible family. And Brian was like this little squeaky voice, little prodigy boy, and they wanted to sing about sunshine and girls and
Convertibles
guitars and
and
convertibles, and that was just the sound of it. And then something changed in Brian. The boy ain't quite right. He just kind of fell apart. And
maybe too many drugs, or at least from the movie that I saw.
I think that the drugs probably sped things up, but
It was
I don't
inevitable.
know. I think he probably would have gone that trajectory but just they didn't help.
Okay.
Same with like Sid Barrett. I think that he probably
that comparison. I definitely the original frontman of Pink Floyd.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that he went from singing about, Little Deuce Coupe and stuff, and all of a sudden he's singing these hellish songs about eating your vegetables and women losing their hair. And there's these, if you listen to Smiley Smile like back to back, like A to Z, Smiley Smile, like the original, there's a couple different versions of it, but it is it's a terrifying album, and I love it.
So what does that speak to about the development of an artist over time?
I would say that, like, if he was just, if we didn't have that arc of like this guy, like, it would just be weird music. But the fact that he went from here to here, or the fact that Weezer, like Rivers Cuomo, before he did the Blue album, he was like in a hair metal band, and it was not even close to the same kind of music.
Interesting.
Or the Beatles were singing like, Chuck Berry covers, and all of a sudden they're writing some of the most, profound and staying music of the 20th century.
So I guess what I'm kind of seeing here is that you have to be transparent with where you are and who you are, and to be confident in that relationship with yourself as you move forward. So the story of where you have been, are, and are going
Mm-hmm.
is a narrative which kind of gives meaning to the artist and their projects.
Yeah,
A little bit
I
of a
would
deeper
say
way, maybe.
I would say never stop recording and never delete anything. Like, just keep keep pressing that record button, keep recording everything, and let people connect the dots of the constellations. And pretty soon, like, it's kind of like a Dadaist philosophy that Dadaist, like, it delights in the absurdity. It's like this art form that's just acknowledges that life is absurd and just has fun with it, which I love. I love that attitude artistically. But according to this Dadaist manifesto, like, if you draw a random word out of a sack and arrange them in exactly the order in which they came out of the bag, one after the other, you have written a poem that says more about you than anything that you could have constructed yourself.
Interesting.
So the abject randomness of this thing, this is of course that's like kind of a silly, like, funny, surreal idea, but it's not up to you to tell people what your music means. It's up to you to create it, and it's up for them to decide what it means.
Okay. I agree with you wholeheartedly for kind of going back to writing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That you could say, this is a terrifying, horrible story, and no one should tie anyone else to a train, the end. But, you just took out the processing out of the human element of
Yeah.
enjoying the story. So I agree that we shouldn't cram down our personal meaning down the audience's throat.
Mm-hmm.
I think that provides, or yes, just inherently puts a lot more of the meaning and weight on kind of like setting the scene.
Mm-hmm.
How do you set the scene appropriately so to kind of nudge the audience in the experience that you want them to have with it?
That's a good and multifaceted question.
It is. If you want to pick a piece of it and break it off, I'm down to chew on it with you.
Okay. How do you prime an audience for something?
Just for a little example, after the zine, I've realized that print is a dead medium,
Mm-hmm.
and that people don't really read it.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm going into documentary type stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a concept for a film, and then once I started filming, it kind of derailed itself, and now I'm like,
Sure.
how do I give a nice lens to look through at these really interesting characters and what they're up to, and how do I not cram the meaning down their throat, but I
Hmm.
want to, give them, provide them with a lens to look through, I guess.
It sounds like, like when you write an essay for school, you start with a thesis
Yeah.
and then you kind of like rationalize it. And I would say that with art, it's kind of it's like backwards. Like you start with the pieces of the puzzle, and at the end of it, you don't have to declare your thesis to the heavens, but you've probably been dancing around some sort of thesis that is resonating true. Like, why are you focusing on this for this long? Why are you spending this much time, uh, like paying attention to this? Why did you accentuate this and this? Why did you delete this part?
So,
So I think
okay.
subconsciously, you're probably expounding something meaningful to yourself, and anybody that's hip to your particular aesthetic is going to pick up the pieces of what you're laying down.
Interesting. So I feel like that also could go back to saying, it's better to have some individuals who resonate with what you resonate with,
Mm-hmm.
be able to smell that meaning and love it for figuring it out themselves and not really care about spelling it out for everyone to get it.
Also, like it's like what Cormac McCarthy said about Blood Meridian. I don't know if you're
I
familiar.
don't know Blood Meridian.
Incredible book.
Okay.
Incredible. He said, books are made of other books. And so I think that the human brain is very much like that. I think that whether consciously or subconsciously, you're putting little injections of the things that you've absorbed throughout your life into the stuff that you're creating. And sometimes you're so unaware of it. You'll like somebody will come up to you and it's just like, I thought it was a really, really cool Dylan Thomas reference you snuck into this song. I couldn't believe it. And I was like, I didn't know I did that.
Interesting.
Okay. All right. So in the song Credits Roll, the one off Itself the Sea, for example, there's a line, saw your feet in striped socks curling underneath the spot. The house had claimed its wicked plot. This can't be the end.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, it's from The Wizard of Oz. And my buddy Clay pointed out, he's like, I think it's really brilliant that you have this Wizard of Oz thing in this Pink Floyd reference. So you're making like this meta thing about, like when you align the Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of
Yeah.
the Moon,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
it
Yeah. Right. And
lines
the
up.
lion roars. Yeah.
And my response was, of course I did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't scheme that
Excuse
to
me.
happen.
I need to make a tweet really quickly. Unrelated.
Yeah, so it was one of those kind of like happy accidents, but it's one of those points that's an example of like a constellation between 2 points that the viewer or listener can make. Like it's a coincidence to me, but the fact that it was probably knocking around because I'm very familiar with Wizard of Oz and Dark Side of the Moon, and because I was barking up that kind of sound for this album, it probably was kicking around that
Yeah.
that was on my brain somewhere, but I wasn't consciously like making an allusion to Wizard of Oz in
So
this Dark Side of the Moon
I,
context.
I guess to synthesize your response to my really loose question,
Mm-hmm.
is when look for something centric
Mm-hmm.
when you're creating a body of work, and then also stay open to the ideas that might be so genius that they just can't it slipped out of your subconscious and you didn't even plan for it to be there,
Yeah.
and to celebrate those happy accidents, to quote Bob Ross on that.
Yeah. I think that it's your work should be like 98% happy accidents and 2% premeditation.
I think that that's very profound, and I think that I should practice that more.
Yeah, and I think that's why people get so precious about their output and what this means, and it's so funny how, like, you know, up their own asses they get about like their own music when it's like the song is breakups are hard, or the song is I'm never leaving this small town, or I'm in love with you, please be in a relationship with me. Not that you
Very
can't
common
say,
tropes.
you can say really profound things with that kind of stuff. Of course, while you're barking up that tree, you can get really complex with longing, and you can say things in really poetic ways and stuff. But a lot of times it's very plain spoken, songs that we've all heard a lot of times without bringing something new to the table or a fresh way to kind of approach it.
Kind of going back to your first point, and that fresh way to approach it is just as us being us and not trying to go, what's the best version of myself that everyone would think is really cool.
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
I'd say that what was I going to say? Um, One thing that I've kind of realized while I've been writing a lot of reviews is that, especially like in the world of like rock and roll, for example, there's really not a lot of stones that are unturned. We've explored pretty much all the guitar distortions now.
Frank Zappa did a lot of work for us.
Yeah, yeah, he did a lot of the heavy lifting, but there's no new frontier. It's kind of like we hit the California coast, and now we're like, okay, now what? And a lot of the artistic world doesn't have, in my limited, in my perspective, it seems like the artistic future is kind of rehashing old ideas in creative new ways, and that we're not creating brand new things anymore, that we are kind of a sampling culture. We're rehashing new ideas. We're putting an old idea in a new set of clothes and making it dance in a new way. And we're playing with the new emerging medias that are coming out, of course, but it's kind of like, I was depressed for a minute because I was like, there's no new music sound. There's no new music, no truly new music. But if you go back to like what we thought was new music back in the 60s and stuff, it was really recycling old ideas back then too, through a different lens.
I think I hear your point. Is it that individually, how we were speaking a minute ago, that our creations are a culmination of our experiences, but also that functions on a greater scale societally, that there are cycles of fads of music, and they kind of just reproduce and refurbish to
Yeah.
the next phase.
I would say that like what's in vogue, what's fashionable, it does have little cycles and stuff. Like for example, I think in the 90s, I think that there was a return to like this enthusiasm for experimentalism that happened in the 60s. So a lot of that 90s music, that grunge and post-grunge stuff, was very steeped in Beatles and English Invasion sort of melodies and sort of pop sounds. So it's experimental for a while, and then it becomes extremely marketable. People are like, here's how you make a number one hit in the post-grunge era. And then that's how you had these like post-grunge producers and mixers and engineers that just churned grunge into like this conservative sort of thing that you could have number one hit. Then what comes along? That "Oh Brother Where Art Thou," clean folk, innocent, kind of cute, back return to form. And then that got commoditized into this stomp clap. Hey,
2010s. You
yeah,
got
you
the
got your
Lumineers and shit.
you got your Lumineers, you got your Mumfords,
Yeah, there we go.
and this cycle of
So you sharing this to free creators up to do what you want to do. It's going to resonate with someone who's went through this cycle somewhere at some point, whatever it may be, and let them resonate with you.
I know people that like they have a friend that like has a moment and all of a sudden their music's everywhere and it's like blowing up. Or like, like I don't know, like somebody like close to like a Seattle artist just blows up, like Macklemore, for example. Then all of a sudden everybody's like trying to make the next Macklemore sound. It's like, buddy, you're too late. Like you can't just like you got to be 5 years sooner.
Yeah.
You got to like anticipate it. So the whole thing of following the trends is it's like getting like hot stock tips. It's like if you've heard about it, it's already too late. It's too late,
Yeah.
So make your own sounds and follow what you want to do, because like if you just follow what the hip sound is, you're always going to be like last place.
Okay, cool. I think to take away or to gather some takeaways, let's go and kind of jump around.
I'm a mess.
A mess of genius, and I fucking love it. And it's kind of fun to build these sandcastles of ideas with you and go, oh, I was looking at it wrong, and flatten it back out and then kind of reform it. So with the last point that you made, trying to reproduce anything is, if you're doing it for popularity's sake, you're already too late to it. Go with your gut feel, and that is going to serve two functions. It's going to make your music the most genuine and easily resonating with people who resonate with what you resonate with, even though there might be some discrepancies or distortions in that period. And then also it makes you efficient too.
Yes. I would say the best thing you can do is, like, my favorite artists are people that make art that's out of time. Like, it's that you can't really like put it like, it's like, oh yeah, of course, like, so I'm talking about people like Cormac McCarthy, Tom Waits, David Lynch. They weren't riding some kind of like cool guy train of like artistic thought. They were making the art they wanted to make, and it was people on the sidelines that took notice and decided it was cool. But if you listen to what I consider Tom Waits' good material, basically from like 1980 to present, like I don't listen to his old like 70s lounge stuff. Apologies to people who like that. I think it's not as creative as his later work. If you listen to like Swordfish Trombones or like Frank's Wild Years,
yeah. Oh, I love that song, Frank's Wild Years. That's
a great song and album. There's an album called that.
It is weird. It's just a story about, kind of in theme to the type of stuff that we were talking about earlier. It's a dude who burns down his wife's house and says he doesn't like her dog, and that's it.
Yeah, it's just the context of it. It's a really cool spoken word thing. But if you told people that it's like, oh, this was recorded in 1984, this came out the same year as Jump by Van Halen.
Yeah, never realized
it doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
And if Tom Waits tried to ride like the hair metal cool guy producer train, like, it would have been so lame. And part of what's so respectable about him is he was just doing his own thing in his own space. Same with David Lynch. If he tried to make like Michael Bay style movies, it would be ridiculous. If Cormac McCarthy tried to write like David Foster Wallace when he was popping off in the 90s, the road would have been a very different book.
So I think if I had to synthesize this entire conversation into one point, it would be to be confident in your intuition, and that's going to set you apart and resonate with who it's meant to resonate with.
Yeah, I would say that there no compromises.
Cool.
Never compromise. Never take notes. Never, never take constructive criticism from other people. Never listen to anything anybody says. Just make your own thing. And I think people get mad at me because they're like, oh, the guitar's a little hot right there. And I'm like, yeah.
I did that. What do you think about it?
Like, I'm not turning it down. The guitar's a little hot right there.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Dude, hell yeah. So speaking about the guitar being a little hot right there,
Yeah.
thinking about credits rolling, where is this album, The Sea Itself, taking you? Where are you going to feature it coming up? What's going on in the future for Tim?
Well, in the future for Tim, you can find Itself the Sea at Champlain Guitars, which we discussed earlier. You can find it at Ritual Records. It's also on the Washington's website. It's at Black Noise Records. And Sam and I are going to probably sneak it onto a couple shelves without the permission of the, we'll go into a Walmart and put a big stack of them.
There we go. I love it.
We'll just do it pirate. I'm just joking about the last one. Maybe. Who knows? If you see it at Walmart, like, Walmart's not making no money off it. You can just shoplift it straight out of the shop.
I have no clue what to say to that point.
Yeah.
But maybe at Goodwill. Leave it on Goodwill.
But there's going to be a slate of shows coming up with some really, really, really good musicians, people that are way better at music than me. Also, Vandal Hands of Man is being released on not vinyl, but
PET.
PET.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
So this is something that Sam, shout out to Sam Shu, super big into the PET.
Yep.
Pretty much take environmentalism and the world of petroleum and the love of records and put that together, and hallelujah, PET plastics.
Yeah. So this is the first PET plastic vinyl in Washington State history.
Congratulations to both you guys. That's really cool.
I'm excited about it, and they're showing up in a little bit. They're arriving in a little bit here, and I can't wait to pop it out of the sleeve and hear it for the first time. But yeah, it's we all remember what happened with the what was it, Ohio, that train wreck. It was like Lebanon, Ohio, the train that derailed and that vinyl.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it was a bad scene. It happened last year, where it was almost like a Chernobyl level event of pollution, where it just like ruined this small town because like lax train regulations or something.
Okay.
Yeah, so vinyl as we know it, like traditionally, like of course we all love it. It's great.
You mentioned that train crash because
it was full of the vinyl.
Oh, and that's what the environmental.
So,
okay, hence the good properties of PET plastics.
Yeah, and not that, I mean, like, vinyl it's a hard thing. It's everywhere, but it's hard to get rid of. And the more you look into environmentalism, like the worse. I think PVC is what they call polyvinyl chloride. I think that's what it's called. But the more you look into it, the worse it is. And of course, PET is not like this miracle cure that's like biodegradable, but it's way easier to dispose of on an environmental scale. Like you can actually dispose of it in a way that is recyclable.
I absolutely love that Washington's is here for our local community in Bellingham, Washington, but also deeply keeping in mind the globe. So I think that is a sweet combination that you guys have. That's really cool.
Yeah, we're trying to do the right things. It's the thing about selling out is it's easy. It's easier to do the thing that's bigger and more marketable. It's easier to be a wealth manager than it is to be an independent artist.
And by selling out, you mean kind of just following the trend.
Yeah, like there's a reason people get judgment for like doing the sellout thing because they want to retire, they want to, whatever the reason. There's a reason why there's a lot of stigma for people like taking the easy way and taking the quick buck and selling out and doing the money thing, is because doing the thing that's right and doing the thing that's good for the community and good for the arts and good for everything else is actually way harder to do. But it's important to do the hard thing and not take the easy money. And that's like to our core, that's what we're all about, is we want to do the right thing. We want to empower independent artists. We want to really prop up those super cool, eccentric artists that are not playlist friendly. And we want to give them the spotlight that they deserve. Because this is a weird place with a lot of really cool, weird music in it. And not everybody wants to listen to, a chill playlist while you do dishes. Some people want to actually listen closely to an album, A to Z, and they want to read the liner notes and the lyrics, and they want to freak out about it.
I think that is absolutely beautiful. I think
that's my stump box.
Well, I think that this is an absolute call to action for everyone to be themselves, make what they want, and don't second guess it, and share it with people that you think might just love it too. Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, thanks for having me on. Is that
you sensed it?
We're getting along in the tooth.
This is awesome having you.
Yeah, man. It's been so fun to be on here, and I love to bloviate. I work from home a lot, so I don't get a chance to talk to people. So I'm kind of like somebody's. You ever see the homeschool kids when they like go to church or something?
The homeschooled kids when they go to church, I don't think I've been to church enough.
Okay,
but
well, like those youth group things where like all of a sudden they're like weird homeschool.
They see other kids like raising their hand and they're like, "What the hell was that?" And they're like, "We do that in classrooms. That wasn't all hail the mothership coming back down."
Well, I'm just talking about like recluses and like homebodies that are like not socialized yet, and finally they have a group of people where they can like just flap their gums for a while. Like if you go to like one of those youth group things, I got talked into it a couple of times. Oh my God, what a waste of time that was. Anyway, but these weird little Rod and Todd Christian kids start they are screaming. They're so excited to see their little buddies. But that's what it's like when I talk about like independent music with
dude
people.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm honored to be a fellow screaming homeschooled child with you, as disturbing as that is. So
you're the Rod to my Todd, and iron helps us play.
There's a lot of references that I'm gonna have to go back and listen to and get an education.
Let's get some hyperlinks in the
let's do it.
in the
down.
bio.
I'm down.
Yeah, because I'm happy to supply links to all of these references.
Dude, cool. Yeah, hey, thanks again, and this was super awesome.
Cool. Pound it.